If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Cool.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You go to emailrevealer.com, you can get a copy of my book, an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator, or you can just go to Amazon and get the book too, and you don't have to worry about me autographing it. I take twice as long to send the book anyway. You need the book right away, you got a problem, order the book on Amazon. How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But at emailrevealers.com, did you know that 30% of all the people you see on those websites, those dating websites, and those personal ads, like Match.com and Plenty of Fish and Tinder and Grindr and all those, 33% of those people are either married or in monogamous relationships. So we can catch them cheating online. What you do is you send us your boyfriend's email address, your girlfriend's email address, your wife, your husband, and we take that email address, we trace it back, and we could find out if they're registered on those dating websites. And then we can even expand the investigation and contact them, find the ad, and locate them, and get them to exchange photos and messages and all kind of fun stuff. Emailrevealer.com. Okay, let me turn this over here. Okay, got a fun guest. I really like this guy. We had him on once before about his book about Barry Seal. And he's back because Sheriff Joe Arpaio is in the news. And our friend here, Shaun Attwood, wrote this book, Hard Time, A Brit in America's Toughest Jail. It's about his experiences, his personal first-hand experiences with Joe Arpaio. So, Shaun, are you there?
I am, absolutely. Cheers from London. Thanks for having me back on.
Thank you so much. Remind the audience, who is Shaun Attwood?
Well, I'm from a little town, industrial north of England, and I moved over to Phoenix, Arizona as a young person because I was dazzled by the sun, the swimming pools, and all that kind of stuff. I ended up making a couple of million in the stock market in my 20s. I was emotionally immature. It went to my head, the money. I started to throw huge ecstasy parties with it. SWAT team smashed my door down, and that was the beginning of my journey into Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail.
So you had your door shut. SWAT came and kicked your door down, just like Paul Manafort, the president's chief of a campaign manager, huh? Okay, and you've written like a slew of books since the last time you've been on the show. Why don't you give us a rundown of all the stuff you're doing? You're writing away there. I should invest in ink.
I moved on from my life story is a trilogy, and I started to write about things that were more important in the world, including the war on drugs. And to make that exciting, I've steeped that in the stories of people like Pablo Escobar, Barry Seal, and just last week I released my book about the Cali cartel. And today actually, Narcos season 3 just comes out, and that features the Cali cartel.
Hey, you know, it always struck me with the Cali cartel is that they did an interview on TV where they were negotiating with the U.S. government. Do you have a clip of that? Did you ever see that?
Well, what happened was, after they took down Pablo Escobar with the U.S. government, the Cali cartel had a lot of goodwill with our government, as in the American government, and also the Colombian government, because everybody wants to get rid of Pablo due to his bombing campaign. So they announced to all their workers that they were going to quit the cocaine business within 6 months and retire peacefully and be allowed to keep all of their assets. And that was rubber stamped by the U.S. government at the time. I think it was, Bill Clinton was in power back then.
Okay, but they never actually went through with that.
When they announced that to their underlings at a meeting, a lot of the underlings started to mouth off and say, well, we have invested in planes, we've invested in infrastructure, we've got cocaine out there, we're owed money. And so many of them revolted and turned around and walked out, turned their backs to the four godfathers. If any of them had done that individually, they would have been assassinated. So there was a revolt, and it basically forced them to continue in business.
And what? Oh, so now that's what forced them to stay in business. But now, what do you make of these wars that go on now? There seems to be a lot of conflict down there between the cartels. How is that working? Who's what?
It's got more and more complex in Mexico.
Yeah.
For starters, the cocaine market increases in size every year because of the black market created by U.S. drug laws and drug laws around the world. So when you stamp on the Colombians on one side of the balloon expands on the other side with the Mexicans. So back when it was Pablo and then the Cali, there was one big cartel in Mexico in the 1980s, and the Mexican government wanted a piece of the action, so they arrested the leader of that cartel, imprisoned him. They put a colonel in charge of their interest, and they basically said, we're in on the deal now with the cocaine. And however, what they hadn't anticipated was that godfather, he'd kept the peace in Mexico for years, but his underlings were very competitive, and they included El Chapo. And those underlings, after he got arrested, went to war. So then you had the war between the four major cartels, which was how it splintered initially. But then in more recent years, you got people like the the Gulf Cartel, they brought in Mexican special forces to protect them. And they became so violent and deadly, they splintered off into their own cartel, the Zetas.
Right.
You never had people's heads getting cut off in Mexico. That wasn't something that they typically went in for. But when the Gulf Cartel got the special forces in, they also brought in Guatemalan special forces. And their thing was they would just go into a village, grab some, people who they were fighting against, and just chop their heads off in front of all of the villagers to scare the living daylights out of them. And importing these Guatemalan mercenaries then was what led to the heads getting cut off in Mexico. A lot of these ISIS videos show people's heads getting cut off. They're not ISIS. It's actually Mexican cartel videos.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, we got to have you back and get into all this in depth. And also, too, I noticed you just wrote a book about the Avery case, Making of a Murderer, Stephen Avery. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I've been ranting and raving about the justice system for years and all of the corruption. And, only a few people listen to me at my blog, John's Jail Journal and stuff. But once the Avery thing hit, Making a Murderer, millions of people all over the world woke up to this overnight. So I put together a book that shows the 10 different strategies the state used to frame those guys.
Okay. Well, we'll check. We're going to definitely have you back on that, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. And you can find Shaun's work at ShaunAttwood.com. And Shaun is spelled S-H-A-U-N, Attwood. And then the other one is johnsjailjournal.com. And that's the one that he was writing while he was there under Sheriff Arpaio. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. My aunt smuggled my writing out of the jail in maximum security.
Oh, well, okay, give us the whole idea. You got busted. They're kicking your door. The FBI kicks in your door. And right away you get down to Maricopa County, right? Just a regular jail, right?
I did about half a day at Tempe because Tempe police, they'd led the investigation. But once they've booked you in, and they brought the feds in as well to photograph me and stuff like that, then they all moved us over to Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail. And the difference between the Tempe jail and Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail was like going from kind of a camp environment to Dante's Inferno.
Well, give us an idea. What was it? What were the details of why was it so bad and different?
Okay, when you first go into Arpaio's jail, there's a formation of cells in a horseshoe shape, and they actually call it the horseshoe. Now, these cells are underground, so there's no light. You don't know what time of the day it is or anything. You can just kind of tell by the heat rising and falling. And you're supposed to go through these cells until you see a judge. This takes you're going through these cells for a few days, and people are sardined in there. All of the new arrestees, People are high. People are drunk. People had fights with the police. People have been tasered. Gang members are in there with rival gang members. There's fights breaking out. There's blood all over the walls. Guards are running in and out, grabbing people. Some guy will go on the toilet and take a crap and stink the whole room out. Or people are puking. Homeless people are trying to sleep on the floor and there's cockroaches crawling everywhere. And then if you really act up, they drag you out. They put you in a medieval torture-looking device called a restraint chair. It's like this black chair, black plastic, and you lean back in it. And then they put a spit hood over your head to prevent you from spitting on the guards. And you see people just demented, just rocking back and forth in these chairs, and it just looks like something out of a horror movie.
Now, were you expecting anything like that? When when they got you in cuffs, and they're talking to you, they're trying to get you to make a deal, and okay, were you expecting anything like that when you knew you were going to jail?
It puts you in complete and utter shock, and after several days, the prisoners started to come up to me, and they would say, "You've got to get that look of shock off your face, or else you're going to get in your head smashed against the toilet next." Like,
did you just assume, okay, well, if I ever get busted, I'll make bail in a couple of days, I'll be out,
Well, I thought I was smarter than the cops.
Yeah.
I thought, I've got money in my friends' names. If the police arrest me, I can use that money and get bailed out. But the police arrested all of my friends on the same day as me. And then secondary friends, they arrested in other SWAT team raids, and on it went until they'd arrested over 100 of my friends. So at the end of the day, I had to turn to my parents because all my assets got seized.
Yeah, they're good at that in Arizona. So they had the DEA and the FBI was involved in your case from the start?
They were, but they dropped it.
They dropped it to the state, yeah.
We didn't have any drugs when they arrested us.
Thank God for that, because if they drop it to the state, you got a chance of getting out, you know what I mean? But if the feds keep your case, it's a point system, you know what I mean? And they got like a 97% conviction rate, too. It's like a hopeless situation. So thank God, at least they did drop it. Okay, now what did your lawyer say to you when you told them where you were?
Okay, so it was a month or so in when my parents remortgaged the house, got some money for Alan Simpson. And it was actually some guys I was doing business with prior to getting arrested, the New Mexican Mafia. They said to me, because they schooled me on dealing with the police, they said to me, if you get arrested, just keep your mouth shut. And the best lawyer to get is Alan Simpson. And his retainer was $50,000 just to start with. And because I had a complex case, it went on for 26 months. So we had to pay him more money as well. But he said in the beginning, because no drugs were found, they'd missed the boat, and I was looking at anywhere from probation to 5 years. But that quickly changed when the prosecutor, she contributed to a article in the Phoenix New Times, and she filed a classification against me called serious drug offender, which carried 25 years to life. And then in the second year, she said basically every time I spoke about drugs on the phone, they had 20 plus calls. If I went to trial and lost, they would stack it all, and I could get a maximum 200-year sentence. And I saw a guy get 200 years for a drug case in Arizona, similar to mine.
Yeah, people don't realize that. And even the 25 to life thing. I'm sure with the conviction you have right now, that if you were to get a second arrest or a third arrest, you could face, on a stupid charge, on something small, on a small felony, you could be facing 25 to life because of his first conviction. Am I right about that?
Yeah, it's not just that as well. I saw a black guy, had previous convictions. He was a war hero, Vietnam vet, Purple Heart. And they found some crumbs of cocaine on the carpet in his car. And I saw him get about a dozen years. And they said in court, I was the only got sentenced. They said he's a black guy, he's got no job, he's got a nice car. He must be a drug dealer if he's got crumbs of cocaine on his carpet.
Wow.
Never seen anything like it.
And I bet he didn't have a lawyer, right?
Exactly. A lot of them don't have lawyers, and I saw people for just a joint of weed back then get anywhere from 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, or even paraphernalia. You know what I mean?
Yeah, paraphernalia too.
Yeah, it's people have no idea. People have no idea. And how about when people tell you, when you hear people talking standing next to you at a party, something like that, or you see it on Facebook or something, where they talk about all these guys, they get 3 hots in a cot, and they got it made, and they got color TV and cable TV, and I don't have any of that stuff. And what do you tell those folks?
They say, lock them up, throw away the key, prisoners are pedophiles, murderers, rapists. And the average arrested person back then was like a young black kid or a young Mexican kid with a little bit of weed, getting thrown into a jail where the neo-Nazi Aryan Brotherhood gang are running the white race, the Mexican mafia running the Mexicans, and the Mau Maus are running the blacks, and they indoctrinate these young people into these gangs, give them neo-Nazi tattoos, get them on the heroin. 90% of prisoners were shooting up heroin. And these kids are ruined, they're criminalized, and they can't get jobs for the rest of their lives.
Now, what did you do? Because you're a white guy. You're really white. You're a white British guy with a British accent. Okay? And you got a skinhead. You're bald, right? You shave your head, right?
Yes.
Okay. But you're with the Mexicans, right? So now what do you do when you go in there? Who'd you go with?
All right, well, I'm lucky because some of my bouncers from the raves were arrested with me, including my best mate from my hometown, Wildman, who is a very big guy, and gets in a lot of fights. So they were kind of protecting me. When I got moved to my building, and I wasn't with those guys, right away, some skinheads from the Aryan Brotherhood just come up to me and they say, hey, get in that cell back there. We want to have a word with you. And you know you can't say no to these guys. So go in the cell, close the door behind me. Biggest one gets up in my face. He's like, what are your charges? What are your charges? And I've read my charges. It's on this little printout from the jail, but I don't understand what it all means. So I say, I'm not sure what my charges mean. They're like, what do you mean you don't know what your charges mean? Are you a chomo? Are you a chomo? So they got me up the walls if they're about to smash me because I don't understand prison etiquette. So I don't know what a chomo is. Chomo's child molester. I pull my charge sheet out. They look at it. They see I'm in for drugs, conspiracy. I've got a bail of $750,000 on my conspiracy, my bond. And they're like, God damn, dog, who did you kill? You guys the mafia or what? So they liked it that I was in for drugs and had a big bond. And they left me alone. Well, they explained to you all the rules. Basically, some charges are KOS, kill on sight, like paedophile stuff. Some charges are SOS, smash on sight, like drive-by shootings, because women and kids sometimes get hit. Under every head of the gang, a guy's called torpedoes. They'll go in and smash someone, no questions asked, just so they can earn their reputations and their tattoos. To be a full member of the gang, you got to murder someone and go to jail for them. So they're constantly looking for people to beat up, to rise up in the gang. Then they say, look, if you can't go sitting at the tables with the other races, or else we'll smash you for that. If someone calls you a punk or a bitch or hits you, you must fight them on the spot, or else we'll smash you for that. You can't go talking to the guards, we'll smash you for snitching. You must take a shower because it's bad hygiene, and if you go around, letting the race down, stinking, then we're going to smash you for that. It just goes on and on and on. They explain all these rules.
Yeah, so you had to obey the rules from the Aryan guys.
Yeah.
Okay, but didn't you have friends though that were in there, like Mexican mafia types?
Yeah, but you got to stay with your own race.
Yeah, okay, all right. I know it's a difficult situation. I know. Okay.
Anything that goes on the streets, even like the street gangs, when they get in there, when it's properly explained to them, like the Mexican American street gangs, they all have to drop the gang rivalries and stand up for the race.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They tell you to fight. Everyone got to fight at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. What a headache. Okay. Now, how long were you in there?
Well, I was in there for 26 months, and that's really a long time. I wouldn't sign a plea bargain, and I got to find out all of the different parts of the jail, so kind of made me an expert on it when I finally started writing about it.
So 26 months before you went to trial or you made a plea. So you
at the end, I signed a plea. They told me basically, if you don't sign a plea, you're never going to get out. So I ended up just signing a plea for 9.5 years.
Whoosh. But it was 26 months as an innocent man, as an unconvicted man, convicted of no crime. 26 months you served before you even had a chance for your day in court. You know what I'm saying? But then wait, you're 9 years. And did you do 9 years?
No, as a first-time non-violent drug offender, I served exactly 5 3/4 because my lawyer, Alan Simpson, and I was told he was a loophole lawyer. He got me a loophole for non-US citizens.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what kind of loophole is that? You'd think that would be... Yeah.
Oh, good grief. It's got this really long legal name that I can't remember it. But basically, I was going to get my 26 months credited against my sentence for my remand period in Arpaio's jail. And then afterwards, I would only have to do such and such a percent of the balance of my sentence. I wouldn't. Usually, when you go to the Arizona Department of Corrections, you got to do 85%.
Right.
But as a foreign person, I think he got it down to 60-something%.
Okay. Well, that's it. You know, it sounds good if you don't have to do it. You know what I mean? It sounds good in theory.
Well, if you've got money, you can get these things, but if you don't,
right,
you never get out.
So now you describe, they put you into, I guess, the population. I forget what they call that when they put you in, after they evaluate you. Then they put you like in your segment of people that are similar to you, of your own kind of danger and hostility and temperament and your own kind of, pretty much your own kind of race and stuff like that. They put you in your own little segment there, right? And that's where you did your long time. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I did my time I was in all different levels of the jail. I started out in medium security. Now, you get in Towers Jail, and it's like, it was designed for 15 people, the pod. Each tower's got 4 pods. But they've got 3 bunks in a single man cell, so there's 45 people in a living area for 15. It's just drug and gang infested mayhem. The priority all day long is for people to get the drugs in, and every single day there's violence. I got used to the sounds of people's heads getting bashed against toilets and bodies getting thrown around.
And what about the correction officers? Did they do anything to maintain order and peace?
The corrections officers would get prisoners to fight,
right,
and then they bet on who was going to win. And they were also bringing drugs in, and a nurse was arrested bringing drugs in. Now, there was 2 really tough guards in this one tower I was at, and they really enforced discipline. Because what happened, there was a race riot actually, and one of them just ran in the middle of this race riot when he was supposed to have waited for backup. Do you want me to give you the race riot story?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so there's 4 major gangs in the pod: whites, blacks, Mexicans, Mexican-Americans. And the head of the blacks, he's extorting members of races, or you could buy a little extra food. You could spend $20 a week at commissary. So, like, I was living off Snickers bars at one point and packets of peanuts and peanut butter. So the head of the blacks, he starts bullying all the other races out of food. So all of the other races' gang leaders got together, and this head of the blacks, knockout, he never lost a fight in the jail. So they said, all right, we're going to send 3 torpedoes to his room to tell him to roll up. Roll up means you got to get your mattress, bed around, knock on the door to the guard, and have the guards move you out of the pod. Otherwise, you're going to get attacked by everybody. So they said, we're going to tell him to roll up. We'll send 3 torpedoes, 1 from each race, to show we're unified. But because he's such a good fighter, we'll have even more torpedoes on the balcony, just in case they need to go in as well, and in case the rest of the blacks kick off. So I'm downstairs on the phone to my girlfriend at this point in time, and I hear his commotion upstairs. And then the blacks are like playing cards and stuff downstairs, and they see that their head is getting attacked. So they all go upstairs, and all these torpedoes at the top of the stairs start pushing them down. This huge black guy, he just rolled down the stairs like a balloon, knocking everybody off the stairs. People start picking up mops and brooms, doing ninja moves. Now, the guard, he puts on a spacesuit and grabs a fire extinguisher-sized canister of chemical spray. And I'm just trying to get up the stairs now because he's turned the phone off. And the battle for this ready. And everything, people are elbowing me down, pushing me down and stuff like this. And I'm like, oh no, he's going to come in behind me and he's going to spin me. Fortunately, the door opened. He started spraying the guy with moves. Once that spray hits the air, have you ever been sprayed?
Yes, I have been. And outside, it demonstrates that. Yeah, I could just imagine what it would be like, because there's no air circulation in these jails.
It doesn't barely work. So imagine 1,000 birds actually getting it. That hits your eye and snot just runs out. Your eyes stings. I turn red again. I got it, and I've got this old-timer cellmate, and says, what you do in this situation is you wrap a wet towel around your head, and you just blink over and over and over, and that washes the chemicals out your eyes. But what happened in the cell was, when the torpedoes went in, the white dude, he was like a cowboy. He was an older guy, spoke in his polite tank. He went in and grabbed the black guy from behind the headlock. Because the black guy was a professional fighter, he stepped back, slammed against the wall, flipped his head back, and instantly broke the white guy's nose. So when all the guards start coming in, the sprays and stuff, the white guy and the black guy were fighting in the cell. The other two torpedoes left. So they just opened up with the sprays until these guys are just fighting blind. Now, in the end, it carried on for a while, but in the end, it calmed down. And they opened the cell door. And the white guy came out with his nose pointing in a new direction. And he said to the guard in his polite cowboy thing, "I know back in peace before you hang me." And they just looked at him like he's crazy. And he just put his nose back in place. And then the black guy comes out. He wasn't even like, because of that 3-in-1 bullshit. When I get out, hey, he really gets to find you.
Or even in daily situations, what kind of medical cases, injuries, small infections, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
There is very little medical care, because to get medical care, you have to beg a guard for a form called a tank order. And you sign it, fill it out, you beg the guard to sign off, and it's very departments. And when it finally gets to medical, they assume that all the prisoners are faking illnesses just to get out of the cell to have a little break from the cell. So you got people like Dix don't get their medication and they just die. Deborah Brayhard, she was in the she did some shoplifting, and her daughter was calling the jail only long to say, "My mum needs her medication," and they were like, "Tough, this is jail." And when the woman was after medication, and blood started to like have a seizure, stuff like that. The guards are just walking around there, and she just ended up lapping and kicks. That was like as well with the Browns. Come out at night looking for food, you roll around, sleep, and it gets you, and you just wake up the next day, little pinpricks on your skin. But in the following days, the pus starts to come out, and it meets your flesh down to the bone on some occasions, and causes a volcano lesion. The guy in jail had been in shootouts, and these spiders putting big holes in people's them bits. So these guys who've been bitten, we take them to guard, and the guard is the same thing. It's the policy of the jail not to treat insect bites. You put yourself near breaking the law, you do it. So we did deal with it. When I assisted then, he'd been bitten in the back. It looked like a plasma. In the military, need to dress with. So in the day, big lot island, all this people would say going for about 10 big that's dragging everyone across the day, like, we need more guys to hold him. People were jumping on. When all the pus was finding out what the Russian guy did, he said the best thing he could do for him was put salt on the wound, use the bacteria.
Oh boy. So minor things, that could be solved with a little antibiotic. Fester.
Well, hey, the taxpayers pay for it all at the end of the day in these lawsuits. When I left the jail, Arpaio had paid out $50 million lawsuits. There was 50 million men, and that is more than 5 jails in the country. Yeah, I'm still taxpayer money when it's asked to the taxpayer.
Yeah, I think that's great in the whole country in Arpaio's jails.
National Geographic Channel put the broad out there, and when they researched it, they found out that around the time I was over 5 period, 2 people actually died in the jail. And since this Arpaio news, the pardon from Trump, my YouTube channel's gone a bit crazy, and one of the most popular videos on it is a gang member murdering Aryan Brotherhood. An Aryan Brotherhood guy murdering a guy who's refused to beat someone up for the gang, and also the guards.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and you get an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. Also to at emailrevealer.com, if you suspect your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend is cheating on you, all you have to do is give us their email address, and we could trace it back to online dating websites and catch them cheating online. Adoption investigations, asset searches, locates, all kinds of fun stuff. People searches at emailrevealer.com. Okay, got a nice show for you today. We have M. William Phelps, who's the author of many, many, many books. But the one we'll be talking about today is A Dangerous Ground, My Friendship with a Serial Killer. Let's see, I had a lot of trouble with Skype today. Let me see if I got him on here, because this is a mess today. I'm having a really bad day. Okay. All right, Mr. Phelps, are you there?
Ed, how you doing? Thanks for having me. Call me Matthew, Ed.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Matthew, you got a website too, right? What's your website?
Website is www.mwilliamphelps.com.
M. William Phelps. And the book is being sold by Kensington Publishing Corporation. Am I correct?
Yeah, published by Kensington, and it's, Barnes & Noble. It should be in Target, all the major retail.
Tell us about yourself. Who is Matthew William Phelps? Did I lose you? I think I lost him. I don't know what's going on today. I can kind of hear you. Skype went down. Fuck. Hey. Okay, let's try it again.
You there, Ed?
Yes, I am. Okay, we are back with Mr. M. William Phelps, and I was asking him, Mr. Phelps, tell us about yourself.
Well, I've written 34 books now. Dangerous Ground, I think, is number 33, and I have one coming out in October and another one coming out in December, actually. I've been an investigative journalist for almost 20 years now, and for the most part, I've written about true crime. I've written about murders that have been fully adjudicated, and there's usually one perp, etc. And throughout my career, I've written about 7 books about serial killers. So I've become pretty much an expert on the serial killer. And this book here, Dangerous Ground, ultimately becomes the pinnacle book of my career in many ways, especially emotionally, I would say.
Let me ask you a question, because, it's funny, because when I first started talking to you today, and I was telling you about the trouble I was having with Skype and everything like that, and I first heard your voice, I thought you were making fun of me, making fun of my New York accent. Okay? I detected with you an East Coast accent. Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm from New England. I live in Connecticut, so I know I'm not making fun of you, man. I'm a brethren, I guess.
Yeah, I said, the guy's making fun of me. I said, all right, let's just go with it. All right, this is pretty intense. Now, Dangerous Ground. It seems that this guy Raven. Now, what I'm not clear about with this story is you became friends with this serial killer. You're working on a documentary series, I guess it is, right? On TV's Dark Minds. But now, is this guy in prison, or is he out free? What's going on with this guy Raven?
Yeah, so back in 2010, I created a TV show called Dark Minds, and what I did was I created basically the nonfiction version of Silence of the Lambs, where I would go out and look at unsolved serial killer cases, and I would utilize different people to help me uncover clues, uncover new information, etc., about those unsolved serial killer cases. And one of the people on the show every week was a bona fide serial killer in prison who was a nameless person on the phone. We kept him anonymous because we didn't want to glorify his crimes, etc., etc. And we gave him a code name. Actually, the president of the network gave him a code name of Investigation Discovery. Henry Schleff gave my serial killer the code name Raven. So Raven was a guy I went to every week on the phone, and I asked him his opinions on some of the cases, some of the details of the cases I was working on, and throughout the past 5 years, since the show has run its course, 3 seasons we did, and no one knew who Raven was. A lot of people were saying online that he was a composite. I made him up for reality television. Other people would guess that he was Joel Rifkin or, some other serial killer. A couple people over the years even guessed that it was Keith Happy Face Jesperson, and they were right. But I did not reveal his identity until about a month ago now, when I published this book, Dangerous Ground. And the book encapsulates the entire relationship from when I met him, why I chose him, how I used him on the show, and then how our relationship became more than, say, journalist and serial killer. It became something else, and I began to ask him every single question you could imagine anybody would want to ask a serial killer.
Well, so we've identified it in a minute. It's Keith Happy Face Jefferson.
Yes.
Okay, well,
that's who it is.
Then tell us about him. What were his crimes? Describe that.
Jesperson killed, brutally strangled 8 women. He was a over-the-road truck driver, and there's just a lot of misinformation about him out there. And I mean, my job wasn't to correct that, but I did ultimately correct that, but. Just a lot of misinformation. For example, just the Happy Face Killer moniker that has become, a type of Hollywood symbol that's connected to him. Happy Face. He's got this nickname, and there's only there's only a handful of serial killers really who have the nicknames. And so. Happy Face, he doodled a happy face on top of a letter that he had sent to the Oregonian newspaper one day, and ever since that day he's been known as the Happy Face Killer. It was no design of his. It wasn't like he set out to be the Happy Face Killer. It was just something he did on this one particular letter. So his crimes were that he killed 8 women over the course of 5 years or so. And what's interesting about his case is that his first murder, Tanya Bennett, in 1990. So he murders this woman in Portland, Oregon, Tanya Bennett. Her body's found, and an investigation ensues. He takes off, and he goes he goes on the road, and he begins his killing spree of 5 years, 8 women. And 2 people get arrested for killing Tanya Bennett. And not only do they get arrested, but they go to trial, and they get convicted, and they get put in prison. And there they sit for the next 4 years while he's out killing. And that's the beginning of his story. So it's quite an amazing story, really, in that respect.
And what set him off to go on this killing spree for 5 years?
Well, there's really, I've studied serial killers my whole career. I've written many books, as I said, about them. And the one thing that I focused on is the psychological aspects and the profile. And, I look for characteristics that all serial killers harbor, et cetera, et cetera. And there's nothing that set him off particularly on killing. I like to say during my talks, my lectures on serial killers that, it's not like it's not as if a 30-year-old man wakes up one day and says, I think I'm going to start killing people, and I'm going to not stop until I get caught. This is a design in the brain, the wires in the brain that get crossed over a long period of time, and it all begins when that individual is born a psychopath. Psychopaths, as I talk about in this book a lot, are born. They're not made. You're born a psychopath. You're born without empathy, if you will. You're born without sympathy. You're born without caring about people. And, not every person born a psychopath becomes a serial killer, but all serial killers are definitely psychopaths.
Is there any kind of treatment for that? I guess not.
No. I mean, Adrian Raine, to his credit, Dr. Adrian Raine in England, and this is the research that I based my opinions on. I really take a lot of. I give Adrian a lot of credit for what he's done. He's done brain scans with the serial killers and psychopaths and et cetera. And I guess the hope one day to maybe scan the brain of a newborn and say, wow, this person's a psychopath. We can start to treat them as early as possible. But is there any cure for that? No, there's no cure for not caring. And look, I can sit here and tell you story after story of talking to Jesperson where that psychopath comes out, and that psychopath, like, we use that word, we think that psychopath comes out, that means he's in a rage or something. What I'm talking about is the pure, unadulterated psychopath who is talking to you, and he's telling you a story about his life, and it's an example of him not caring, him not having sympathy, empathy, and if you allow me, I'll explain an anecdote that Jesperson shared with me that is very compelling.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So how I explain this is that I'm sitting with him in prison way, and I'm talking to him, and we're sitting inches away from each other, and we're talking about a man who's 6'6", 6'7", 300 pounds, massive man, and we're sitting and we're talking, and this was 4.5 years into our interviews, and I said to him one day, I said to him that day, I said, tell me about what's going on inside you. I mean, let's get to the core of this. I mean, what are you thinking? Tell me something about yourself, personal, your kids, something. Because throughout this all, Ed, I was constantly in search of humanity in this man. I wanted to find a smidgen of humanity inside this monster. That's what I was looking for. And on this particular day, he said to me, let me tell you a story about my son. And his son was maybe 3 or 4 years old. He tells the story as he tells it. And his son is building wooden blocks. And he's building these blocks up. And Jesperson is sitting next to him. And without the kid knowing, Jesperson is taking the bottom block and he's knocking it down. And the whole house comes crumbling down. Jesperson did this a few times to his son. His son started to get real frustrated, crying, upset. Now, the kid didn't know he was doing it. But Jesperson said to me, he said, I enjoyed that. He said, Phelps, you got to understand something. When I did that to that kid, and he's in pain, I enjoyed that. Now, Ed, if we stop there, we're going to say that's one cold son of a bitch. That's what we're going to call him. He's cold. But what he said next is really telling. What Jesperson said to me next is, I don't know why, Phelps. I do not know why I felt good. I didn't want to feel good, but I felt good, and I can't tell you why. Well, I can tell you why, because he's a psychopath, and he has no choice but to feel good about something like that. So that's just an anecdote of what I'm talking about, witnessing, you will, the psychopath in person.
Well, just the idea this guy had kids to begin with is horrifying. But now your book is, your book is called Dangerous Ground, My Friendship with a Serial Killer. Now, how could you find common ground to have a friendship with someone like that?
Well, the friendship part should be in quotes. I mean, that's more of a marketing ploy than anything else. I mean, I'm a journalist, and he's my subject. But no, that being said, I mean, the relationship did become something that I never expected it to. I mean, in the book, you'll see there's a downward physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual downfall of mine that happens over 5 years, where I lose my faith, where I end up in the ER with anxiety issues, where I'm in my bathroom at times, with internal GI issues from anxiety and stress and crying, and all of this stuff manifests itself in me. One person said it well. I think you became possessed by the devil. I think that's a really good way to metaphorically talk about it, if you will. But so friendship is not something that, I didn't set out to become friends with this guy, and we never talked personally like that. I tried to keep personality out of it. A forensic psychologist friend of mine, actually a mentor, a guy who I look to as a father, John Kelly, who was on my show Dark Minds with me, told me, he said, Matt, he said, when you're with Jesperson on the phone, in person, in letters, even Skype, we Skyped for a number of weeks. When you're with him, you're M. William Phelps. You're never Matthew. Never ever are you Matthew. You cannot allow him to personalize you. You always have to be that brand name. And a few times I let my guard down, and I guess that's where the friendship part comes into play.
Now, you say that you lost your faith. What kind of faith do you have? What is your faith?
Well, going into that book, I was a 4 to 5 time a week mass attendee at my local Catholic church here, and I was a devout Catholic. I mean, I was, I went to adoration, a couple times a month. I mean, I was that guy.
Right.
And as time went on, and I don't blame this on Jesperson or the situation. I don't know what happened, Ed. I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that over a period of that time, I started to just question everything, and I started to sit in that church and not feel anything. And one day I was in that church, and I write about this in the book. I was sitting in my local church a mile from the house, and with my normal mass attendee people in the morning. There's a scant crowd that goes every morning.
Sure.
And I sat there and I said, Jesus, I said, if I really believed in you and I believed in all of this, why have I never gotten on my knees and prayed for the soul of that man, that monster? Why have I never done that? If I really honestly believe that this is true, and that if I pray for his soul that, I can redeem him, why haven't I never done that? So that started me down a road of thinking, well, statues, and look at, you're in the entertainment business in many ways, so you'll probably relate to this. When you work in publishing and you work in television, you meet a lot of atheists. There's a lot of atheists, and I worked with a lot, and I'm not saying that they had an effect on me, because they never preached to me anything. I'm not blaming them or nothing. I'm just saying that there's not a spiritual foundation there in the entertainment business. And so, that being said, I drove into Mass one day, and I just turned around. I drove back home to my office, and I started working, and I never went back. And it's been going on 18 months or so, 20 months, and I've gone back here and there over the past 6 months or so, and I haven't felt much. The last couple times I did go this month, or actually in August, I was beginning to feel something again, but nothing like I ever felt before. Nothing.
Well, I think that happens to everyone in their Christian walk. You know what I mean? You have your ups and downs, you have your lulls, your valleys, your peaks and valleys, you might call it. I think that happens to all of us. You go through these phases. But you have to. You said it could have been demon possession. You know what I mean? And if you're right there with someone like that all the time, that had to have affected you.
Interesting thing is that, and I've said this, so anybody who's who's listening to this has heard me before will hear this same redundant story, but it's very important. Kelly, my forensic psychologist, when I started this process with Jefferson back 5-6 years ago, Kelly pulled me aside and he said, Matthew, he said, listen, you're a strong guy. You're big, you're tough, you lift weights, you go to Catholic Mass. I mean, you're this tough guy. He said, let me tell you something. He said, the devil knocks on your door. You let him in. You had better be ready to dance with him, or he's going to get inside your head. I laughed kind of at Kelly mockingly a little bit, and we kind of, and I kind of said, John, come on, you're talking about me here. But you know what, Ed? I was not laughing 5 years later. I was crying 5 years later. So there you go.
Yeah, all this is true, and all this stuff is in the Bible. It's not something that's hocus pocus or bizarre or out there, TV shows or movies. This is the stuff you deal with in your Christian faith. Now, let me ask you a question, because this sounds like this has just had like a dramatic effect on you in every area of your life. This 5 years with this guy, this Raven, Keith Happyface Jefferson. But now, what just in dealing with this serial killer phenomenon all your life, before this, did you have, because I think I get PTSD from my work as a private investigator and some of the people in trauma and crisis that I see all the time, and then these crazy shows I do with these horrific cases and stories. You have guests on who've been through hell, like the guy who was in the Waco, one of the guys that was in Waco when it caught fire, when his arms burnt up and his daughter died in the fire. I had him on the show for 2 hours, and I left that show a wreck,
Right.
Have you had PTSD before this guy? Any symptoms of it, or you think you were fine?
Well, I write about this a little bit in the book. I write about the fact that for 33 books or 32 books, murder books, meaning I investigated murder, serial murder, and I've seen things nobody should see. I've been to places nobody should be at. I can't unsee that stuff. Now, that being said, for all those books, I was able to. Those were fully adjudicated cases, cut and paste. They were done. I interviewed people. I wrote the book, etc. For those cases, for the most part, I could go into my office at 5 in the morning, which I do, and leave at 5 in the afternoon, close the door, and then be Matthew, right? And be the family guy. With the Jefferson book, when I started working with this stuff, I was getting so close and so in touch with who this person was and the things he had done. And you got to understand, some of the things he's done are the most brutal things I've ever heard. So I was getting every single detail, right? This stuff started to stick with me. It would come to me in the middle of the night. I'd wake up, I'd see images on my ceiling. I'd be walking my dog and I'd think of things. So you asked PTSD. Absolutely. But it was a gradual process over the course of this one interview, because it lasted for 5 years. And I don't mean that I interviewed him one day and 2 weeks later we'd call. This is what I mean. I mean that we spoke at least 2 times a week, if not 5 times a week. I visited him in prison. We Skyped. And over the course of those years, he sent me over 7,000 pages of letters that I read. And artwork and all kinds of stuff. So this demon definitely possessed me, if you want to look at it that way. And sure, I mean, as we talk right now, I'm separated from my wife of 21 years, and that separation has been over a year now. So I mean, this is the toll this has taken on me has just been tremendous.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your family. What about kids? You got kids?
Yeah, I have 3 kids. They're older, 29, 27, and a daughter, 18, who actually just went to college on Friday. So,
right.
So yeah, I mean, I became a bitter guy. I became depressed. I became dark. I became, and I'm not saying though that's what led to the separation with my wife. There's lots of things involved with that, but it's all part of it, and I'm slowly. Now, if you could picture a guy crawling out of a quicksand hole, and he's got the tree branch, that's me. I'm halfway out, but I got firm grip of that tree branch, and I'm pulling myself out. I will not, Ed, be another one of his victims. That is something I'm determined. I will not be another victim of his.
And what are you doing actively to get out of this kind of oppression? I guess it is this demonic oppression that's over you.
Well, I'm sorting out my life. As I wrote in the book, I started therapy during the process of writing the book. It's right in there in real time when I start, and I still continue to go to see her. Sonia, she's a wonderful person. Sonia Cusimano, she's a wonderful person. She's helped me tremendously understand what's happened. And I've rededicated myself to focusing on television projects, on other things, still crime, but just other stuff, other jobs. I'm writing a different type of book right now. It's a book about a survivor of crime. So, I'm trying to do the little things. The only other thing though is I'm still in this because I'm doing media for the book. I'm talking about it right now, and I'm still in communication with Jesterson because of the media for the book. So I talk to him maybe once every 10 days or so. He still sends me a tremendous amount of letters that remain unopened on my desk. I have probably 20 letters been unopened on my desk from him. And I'm as we speak, I'm packing to go to Hollywood, to LA tomorrow to begin shooting part of a documentary for this book. And that's all good stuff. I view that as good stuff. That's my redemption part of this.
Yeah, keep busy with your work. That does help. Now, what about this guy Jefferson? What about his family? Because you mentioned he had a 3-year-old kid. Now, has his family gone through the same kind of thing that you're talking about?
Well, that's an interesting story. There's a sour spot in there for me, but his daughter, Melissa Moore, wrote a book called Shattered, and I talk a little bit about that book in my book. She parlayed that book into a television show called Monster in the Family, Melissa Moore. And then she parlayed that into a spot on Crime Watch Daily, and now she's on the Dr. Oz show on True Crime Tuesdays as a correspondent. And this has kind of branded her. This has branded her the daughter of a serial killer. She was, I think, 5 years old or when he left the house, or 6 years old when he moved out of the house, and she really didn't know him after that much other than a weekend here or there. But so I have mixed feelings about that. But the kid, his sons is fine. I mean, his kids are fine. His wife is someone that he looks at, Rose, is someone he blames the switch being flipped inside of him, going from family guy to serial killer. And I looked at that in depth when I researched him and talked to him, and I found that, he divorced his wife might have contributed to it, but he had a hatred for women that's buried deep inside him that no one will ever know where it comes from.
Okay, and what about, you mentioned earlier too that there were 2 men that were convicted of the murder that he was responsible for. Did they get out? Are they out now?
That's a man and a woman, not 2 men. It was Laverne and John Sosnowski and Laverne Pavlik. They were let out after I want to say after he gave himself up, but there was a combination of they were closing in on him, and then he gave himself up in 1995. They were in prison, and when he gave himself up, he said to his lawyer, "There's 2 people in prison who shouldn't be. I killed that first woman then." And he actually had to prove to the prosecutors that he killed the woman because they didn't want to believe him, and because they had 2 people in prison for it. And he talks a lot about that case. The first third of my book is about that. He really thinks the cops and the prosecutor knew they had the wrong people, and they kept him in jail anyway. And he asked me to reinvestigate that and prove that that's what happened, and I did reinvestigate it.
Now, when they were released, did they get one of those lawsuits where they got compensation?
I believe they did. And I believe that she's dead now. Laverne is dead now. I don't know where John is. He may be dead also. It was a really strange situation because what happened was in that situation was that Laverne is sitting at home in Portland, Oregon, and she sees this body that's been found in the gorge area of the Vista House. maybe 30 minutes from downtown Portland. She sees this body found, and she calls up, and she says, I know who committed that murder. My live-in boyfriend, he's an alcoholic, and he told me about it. He came home and told me about it. And so she gives a name. Look up this guy, and he's got a violent history. He's got all kinds of problems, right? And so they come over, they interview her, and she gives them some detailed information about the case that she gleaned from either the newspapers or she made up or whatever, but it seemed to match. And then at one point, she says, and I helped them.
Oh, my God. Okay?
And so now they arrest her. And she starts giving them more detailed information. She even takes them to where the body was dumped, and she shows them where the body was dumped. And that, Jesperson tried to say, was never made public. How could she possibly know it? But where the body was dumped wasn't made public, but a couple of things were made public, so she was able to figure out where the body was when they brought her out to the area. So that's not such a stretch. But here's the kicker. They get into court, and there's a trial, and she's on the witness stand, and she admits to help John, her boyfriend, murder and rape this girl. She admits to it. So what is the jury supposed to do? The jury hears a confession from this woman, and they convict her. And then John is faced with, her boyfriend's faced with the death penalty, and he says, I'm going to plead guilty. I don't want to face the death penalty. And the reason why she did this all is because he was beating her, according to her. And she was tired of being beaten by this man, and she wanted him put away. And then one lie led to the next, and next thing you know, they're sitting in a court of law facing a jury.
Yeah, as crazy as it sounds, you do run across these kind of people with these stories. It's just you don't know what the hell they're thinking. It's a good time to take a commercial break, okay? We're with M. William Phelps. His website is mwilliamphelps.com. And the book we're talking about today is Dangerous Ground, My Friendship with a Serial Killer. And it's about this guy, Keith Happy Face Jefferson. And now a word from our sponsors. Archival Revival, the Christian Film Archive, is currently paying for vintage Christian films. They are dedicated to preserving and restoring classic Christian films and media. So if you have an original prints, negatives, or other film elements of classic Christian films, or you have audio recording masters for classic Christian record albums, they want to buy them from you. So email archival.revival@gmail.com, and they're going to make you an offer. Archival Revival wants to preserve these classic Christian films so that they continue saving people for years. These films have brought people to salvation. They want to continue that. Their staff has decades of experience in handling and preserving of film elements, and they utilize the very best climate-controlled film storage facilities around the world. Contact them today at archival.revival@gmail.com. If there's someone you know has these prints, negatives, recording masters, or other materials from vintage Christian films, you can check out their blog at archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Now, just so you understand, Archival Revival wants to pay you for these films. So you can look in your church attic, in the church basement. If you have a friend who runs a Christian youth ministry or these youth vacation Bible study camps, they have these old films in those big metal containers, 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. Archival Revival wants to buy them from you. So this is a sponsor that actually wants to give you money. And all you have to do is contact them, tell them what you have. If you're in the UK or Ireland or Africa, these films are all over the world, and they're gathering dust, and they're going to deteriorate if they don't get into the hands of Archival Revival. So that's archival.revival@gmail.com, or the blog spot is archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Don't forget, this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. Phoebe Sod is an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. The Cocoa Exchange is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries, and they make the finest silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you go to pscocoa.com, you click on the Shop Now button. You can see all their beautiful chocolates. You can order it right now tonight. It could be in your mailbox in a couple of days. Or if you want to get into the chocolate business, you want to be a chocolatier just like Phoebe Sod, you can click the Contact Us button, and you can learn how to get your own website, go into the cocoa chocolate business, and sell chocolate and make a little bit of money there. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But you also do all the kind of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, even gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication or involved in a extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Adoption investigations. If you want to locate your birth parents or your birth child you gave away for adoption, we can do adoption investigations for you. Asset searches for you. Locate bank accounts, hidden assets, hidden properties, hidden income, all different kinds of services in the asset search investigation. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we can do an email trace investigation for you, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with M. William Phelps. His website is mwilliamphelps.com, and you can find him on Twitter at M. William Phelps. But also, too, the book we're talking about today is Dangerous Ground, My Friendship with a Serial Killer. And it's a story of this guy, Keith Happy Face Jefferson. Now, it says here, too, I was reading about the book, a little write-up about the book, that you would talk to him and he would give you insights into cases. And one of the cases was the brutal murder of your own sister-in-law?
Yeah. Yeah, that's all part of this story, too. I was thinking, too, I should correct something. I was just looking at the date. I've been separated from my wife now a year and a half, not a year. I think I said a year, but I wanted to correct that. My sister-in-law was murdered in 1996 in Hartford, Connecticut. She was 5 months pregnant. Unfortunately, a pillowcase was put over her head, a telephone cord wrapped around her neck. She was found lying on a bed in the apartment, and it's unsolved to this day. My brother, I like to say, I think I said it in the book, my brother committed the longest suicide on record after her death. It took him like 8 years to kill himself with drugs after she died. And thus they were left with, the three kids are doing well, though. The three kids are doing well as we speak. So, that was, I opened the book with a prologue about my brother. And then I talked a little bit about how Jesperson said he's going to help me with that. And we got into a little thing with that because I didn't want to get personal with him at all, and that even meant her case. But I must give him credit. He did offer in some insight into it. And it's weird because I said to him, I said, what possibly could you offer me about my sister-in-law's murder? You know nothing about her, about my family, about the case. And I said, what could you possibly offer? He said, well, I commented on what 20-something cases on your television, and I didn't know anything about those cases until you sent me the research. So, and he was right. So we talked a little bit about it. I didn't get it too involved in that because it was so personal. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I came out of it with him that he schooled me on was that because something families hear all the time, and our family's no different. We hear it all the time. It's been what? It's been 1996. It's been 20-something years. And we hear this time and again, and I just heard it while I was working on the book. I called the prosecutor's office. A friend, I know him. I said, what's going on with her case? Oh, we're waiting on DNA. And it's like certain families hear that just year after year after year. We're waiting on DNA. And here's the bottom line that Jesperson, the point he made, he said, they're not waiting on DNA. He said, they don't care about her or her case. He said, it was the same with some of the girls, most of the girls I murdered. No one cared about them. He said, that's who we choose. No, we choose the girls no one cares about. And it's funny because for many, many years, it was believed that my sister-in-law was murdered by the Asylum Hill Killer in Hartford, a guy who had murdered, 15 other women. In fact, one woman was found 150 yards away from where my sister-in-law was murdered. So it was proven, and I kind of interviewed. Well, I kind of talked to a detective I knew, and I was in his office, and I write about this in the book. And he proved to me that it was not the Asylum Hill Killer, definitely not, that killed my sister-in-law. But Jesperson was on the right course, My sister-in-law was a hard chick. She was not liked by a lot of cops and people, and those are the girls that I call it, in the book, I call it the Natalie Holloway syndrome, meaning if you're blonde-haired and blue-eyed and you come from a little bit of money and you go missing, the satellite trucks are at your house and they don't leave. And there's TV specials made about you, and it's never ending. But if you're some girl, a Hispanic girl in the inner city, and I know plenty of these cases, dozens of these cases, there's no satellite trucks. There's no TV shows made about you. It's you were just gone and forgotten, really. And that's the sad reality of this country we live in.
And we got to keep in mind, too, that, the cops are just humans. Homicide cops are just humans. Everybody just everyone, you, me, everyone, we just want to go to work and go home. We're not looking for extra work, or you know what I'm talking about? We're not looking for extra workload every day.
I learned this on my show that, and there's a certain point cases come to, and my sister-in-law's case is certainly at that point where, and this as a PI, there's certain cases you come to where you can't do anything else. You have to wait for information to come to you, to come in. You could knock on every door again, and you can do that. But until someone jogs their memory and they come to you, nothing's going to happen. And I ran into that time again on Dark Minds with the cold cases.
Yeah. Now back to this guy Raven. There's a couple of things too. That during your conversations with him, there were unknown victims. He confessed to additional crimes that he wasn't convicted of. Well, that's an interesting, and that's part of what I'm focusing on right now. Part of my focus right now in the documentary that I'm beginning to make is that Jesperson has 3 Jane Does, meaning he admits to killing the woman, he admits to where he put the body, they find the body, but we just can't identify her. So she's unidentified. One of those women is from Florida. And I worked 2 years with him. I lied to him about certain things, and I worked behind his back with law enforcement to get him to help identify her, and that's an ongoing project. But the case that you're specifically mentioning is a case in California. If you look up Jesperson on the Internet, his victim number 6, I believe she is, Cynthia Rose. He is connected to this woman, Cynthia Rose, that he murdered Cynthia Rose. It's one of his 8. Well, I prove in this book that he did not murder Cynthia Rose, that the woman he did murder is still buried where he put her. And it's a complicated, complex case that I'm going to outline in the documentary and that I outline in the book. But
this was something he admitted to me early on, and he started to talk to me about. And I kind of just had rolled my eyes like, yeah, there's a serial killer telling me he didn't kill one of his victims, right? But the more I looked into it, the more I was able to get some documents that nobody else was able to get. I unequivocally proved that he did not kill this girl, and that he killed somebody else, and that woman should still be buried where he put her.
And then how did he get pinned for that murder? Just because it was the same style of murders?
Well, it all fit. It's like the girl that he picked up, the story that he told police matched the story of Cynthia Rose going missing and where Cynthia Rose was found. So it all matched, and the timing matched. But when you look at the real when you fine-tune this godless crime and you begin to look at it all, it doesn't match. Because this was a transient area where he was, where there were all kinds of girls coming and going all night long, and a lot of these girls were doing things to get drugs and that sort of thing. So, yeah, and he didn't realize it himself until 2009. That's what's interesting about this. So he signed off on Cynthia Rose, as one of his 8. He signed off on it. Now he gets to 2009, he claims, and he's answering some charges in California. And he's in the back room waiting to go into court, and they got a file in front of him, he says, and on the file is a picture, and he says to the detective and the prosecutor, who's that girl? And they're like, well, that's Cynthia Rose. And he's like, no, that's not the girl I killed. And they're like, get that file away from him. That's his story. So he tells me this story. I'm like, oh, so that's how you come to this conclusion you didn't kill Cynthia Rose. He says, no. The girl that they say is Cynthia Rose, I did not kill her. He said, Phelps, you got to find out what's going on. Because if I didn't kill her, my victim's still there.
And is that the location of a still buried body? Is that what you're talking about when you talk about that?
Yes. And you got to understand that the still buried body would be approximately 150 yards away from where they found Cynthia Rose. So that's how all this confusion came into play.
And now, has that body been found? The still hidden body?
No.
Oh my God!
It's a parking lot right now. It's a parking lot, a paved parking lot. And, I'm going to stir up those waters soon.
Okay, and then there's something else you mentioned, a jaw-dropping admission. What's that?
Well, that's part of the same case. The jaw-dropping admission was, oh, my God, there's a body still buried of a serial killer's body is still out there. That's the jaw-dropping admission. That's what we were talking about there.
Yeah, and that's just one of those things, truth being stranger than fiction, that the two killers would drop their bodies in 150 feet apart from each other.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at it that way, it's definitely not, it can't be a coincidence. But
yeah,
that's banking on the fact that Cynthia Rose was killed. I proved she wasn't killed.
Okay,
I proved.
Okay, what?
Yeah, I proved she died of a heroin overdose, and that's science. You can't argue science. It's right there. Bang! I got the reports. Nobody has ever seen these reports, and bang, there it is, right there. She died of a heroin overdose.
But then was she buried, though, afterwards?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. She was leaning against a tree, kind of. And what he explained to cops was that he put his body like in a truck rut. It was a truck stop. And he put the body in a truck rut and kind of just pushed the surface dirt over her and put some tumbleweeds over her. So that's where the confusion came in. That, okay, this adds up.
Right.
It's in the same spot. It adds up. The girl was taken from here, and, it all adds up until you look at the pictures. And his description of his victim, you look at Cynthia Rose, totally different. So and the fact that Cynthia Rose was alive the next morning when he was, 1,000 miles away. And I have his trucker logs prove that. So when you look at the details any good investigator would look at, they don't add up. It doesn't add up.
What an incredible story. A Dangerous Ground, My Friendship with a Serial Killer. You can get it at our guest's website, M. William Phillips, and also I'll have it in the Opperman Report bookstore at OppermanReport.com. Now, we're pretty much out of time. Is there anything in this story I've left out that I have forgotten to ask you?
Well, there's plenty, and people can read the book for that, Ed. But I just want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. I mean, it's an incredible journey. This story. It's my personal journey too. It talks about my childhood and and all of that. So it talks about how I got into crime writing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I really want to thank you, too, because I want to appreciate you being so kind about me screwing up with the Skype at the beginning of the show. Very kind about that. But also, too, I know this is to revisit all this. It's traumatic, right? Still?
Oh, it still is. I mean, yeah, I've been talking about it now since the book came out in late July. And, talking about it helps, but I'm done talking about it, really. I've said all I can say in the book, and now I'm going to do this documentary, and it's like, I got to move on from this story at some point, and I will. And I'm good. I'm in a better place now. Not necessarily. I'm in a much better place now than I have been. But yeah, it's this is real stuff. This is reality here. This is not G-rated material. This is reality for me.
No, I could tell. I could tell. And people can find you on Twitter again at M. William Phillips on Twitter. Is there anything you want to leave us with before we go?
No, just thank you. And, look, the advice here is, be careful. Yeah. Be careful what you get involved in. The metaphor that I use is, in Connecticut here, the ocean water is 60 degrees, and you get in and it's jarring and it's cold. But you know what? You get used to that water after a while, and the temperature hasn't changed. You've just gotten really used to it. So be careful what you get used to.
Whoa, chilling. Mr. Phillips, thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Ed.
Good night. Whoa, that was really intense, man. M. William Phillips, Matthew William Phillips. The book is Dangerous Ground, My Friendship with a Serial Killer. And I could really relate to what he's talking to because, I especially that story with the guy from Waco. I did that show. And some of these other things I got to deal with here. It's very, very intense. It could really drag you down. I told the story about how having a girl here in the house here who was crying and telling me about how she committed suicide, or attempted suicide, 9 years old, and running from the house from her parents, holding their two baby brothers and sisters, while her father is shooting at the mother. This kind of stuff, it's really, really, really takes its toll on you. Now, M. William Phelps. I've been calling him Phelps all through the show. Darn. M. William Phelps, Phelps. What do you call it? We did another show with him, okay? I did another show with him, and when we booked this show, I went looking for the other show. I couldn't find it. It was been deleted off of YouTube. Another show that just got removed off of YouTube. So I'm going to find that, and I'm going to reload it back up. It's M. William Phelps, Phelps.com. You can find him on Twitter, too. And the book is Dangerous Ground.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. And today we're doing a special segment for you. We're introducing a new sponsor called Archival Revival. And you can find their website is at archivalrevival.blogspot.com. We have with us today Brian Rosenquist, who's the representative there. This is his brainchild. What this is basically is, I'll give you a little quick rundown on this, is Brian Rosenquist and the people behind him have created a company to purchase old Christian films in order to preserve them and keep them current. Because a lot of these things are sitting away in people's closets and stuff like that. They're deteriorating. So they want to preserve them, and they want to purchase them. So if you have one of these films in your closet or something, listen carefully. We'll tell you what to do. So, Brian, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Now, Brian, tell us about yourself first. Who is Brian Rosenquist?
I'm a lot of things. I'm 37 years old. I live in Seattle. I'm married. I have 3 dogs. I do a lot of different jobs. I'm a film archivist. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an animator. I'm a 3D photographer.
And you were saying you just did some kind of animation for the Comedy Channel or something like that?
Oh, I can't talk about that.
Oh, you can't talk. Well, okay, make believe you didn't hear that. Okay. So then, what is the deal with this archival revival? Explain this to us.
Archival Revival is a company that I created with some friends, and we created it out of this desire to, we grew up kind of watching Christian movies in church. So a lot of us were kind of fans of them. That we'd seen them a lot growing up in church, and talking, we were sort of thinking that some friends and I who work in film archiving, who know about the way that film breaks down over time, kind of turns into vinegar after a while. If it's not properly archived, films will be lost just because of the prints, the negatives, the elements that are made in creating the prints. So they don't last forever. If they're properly stored, they can last a long time. But if they're just sitting in closets, they melt, basically. So when we started thinking to ourselves, we know there are these films out there that this will probably happen to, because just labs where you could store your films if you were a filmmaker. There used to be labs in every city in the country. Now they're gone. There are a few really big labs that store film elements for major studios. There are not very many other labs left in the country where people can that they've made. So it means that films that used to be stored in labs are now in people's closets, basically.
Okay, now these films, you're saying that these are Christian movies that they used to show in church. Now, these were never shown on TV or at the movie theaters. They were just shown in church?
That's correct, yeah. A lot of them. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a broad genre. So there are all kinds of Christian films, and some of them were shown in theaters. I mean, there was a remake of Left Behind not that long ago with Nicolas Cage. That was in theaters. But some of the films that we're dealing with right now and that we're interested in acquiring, they were never shown outside of churches.
Okay, now let's say I inherited my uncle's estate or my grandfather's estate, and in his estate he has a bunch of these old. It's like 35 millimeter film, right?
Yep.
Okay.
16 and 35.
In those big metal canisters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, how would I know that my film is one of the ones you want?
Well, it would have a label. It should be labeled with the title of the film, hopefully a year also. There are certain films that we're specifically looking for, but we are interested in, preserving any films that come to us, basically. So, if they're Christian films, because it's a genre that gets overlooked a lot and that gets made fun of a lot, and so we think that these are films that are really nobody's really thinking of in terms of preservation. There are a few, but not very many. There are not very many people or companies involved in archiving these films. So it was something that we thought maybe we should try to take upon ourselves.
Okay, so is this something like I could go to the pastor of my church and say, "Hey, pastor, you got any old films in your closet, in your storage, in the attic of this church? Can we go find them?" Okay,
absolutely, because that's where a lot of them are.
If they're only playing them in church, sure. And then how much are you paying for these films?
It depends. It really depends on what the film is, what the element is. I mean, if it's a print, we would pay less for that than we would for like original negatives or inner negatives or the original film elements that were used in creating the prints. But anywhere from $100, $200 to maybe $500.
Okay. So there's a lot of churches would love to get $500 or $200 even. Are you kidding me?
Yep.
So step one, I go talk to my pastor, and he hands me one of these film canisters. It's covered with dust, right? There's no label on it. Now, what do? I just contact you at this email address, archival.revival@gmail.com, and I just start the ball rolling, say, hey, I got a film here. Maybe I could take a picture of it, and you could, I send it to you, and you could give me
that would be helpful. If there's no label, if there's no title labeled on the can, then yeah, any kinds of photographs of the film would be very helpful in trying to identify the film.
And this is that kind of film too that I could like hold it up to the light and look at a couple of frames and see what would I be looking for?
You would be looking, for a title near the beginning of the film.
Oh, that's a good
idea. You would
idea.
have to go through some leader. You would probably have to go through some film, and at that point, you would run the risk of damaging it because it would begin to spool out. It's tricky. You need to handle the film very carefully. So if you have to pull a bunch of film out in order to look at a frame, you don't want to do that.
Okay, well, we have a lot of listeners up there in the Portland area and in Seattle and in Oregon. So I guess you could meet each other at a Denny's or something like that. They could show it to
that too. But I mean, if we're interested in a lot of these films. So depending on people have a lot of titles we are interested in purchasing.
Well, give me an example. Like what kind of titles? Can you give us some?
Well, at the moment we are involved in restoring 3 films that were produced by Mississippi preacher Estes Perkle. He was most famous for a film called The Burning Hell, South, because he made movies that played mostly at drive-ins. He and his family survived a plane crash in 1967 and became born-again Christians, and they devoted the rest of their career to making Christian films. So that's how they came into contact with Estes Perkle and began making the 3 films that we're working on right now. Now, some other films that we're interested in acquiring are films that were directed by Ron Ormond after his affiliation with Estes Perkle. He made a film in 1976 called The Grim Reaper, which is that was actually the first one that I ever saw by Ron Ormond. It's a film about why you should not try to communicate with spirits of the dead.
Oh, very good.
It's kind of like a surreal, almost like a Christian horror movie. It's pretty fun. But it has an important message as well. I'm not trying to be light about it. And anyway, that's one that we're trying to find. The thing about the films directed by Ron Ormond, most of the prints and the negatives were destroyed in a flood about 10 years ago. There was a big flood in Nashville. So, his son, Tim, had a bunch of prints and lost everything. Now, we know that there are still prints of these films out there in churches, and so that's one of the films that we're very interested in finding. Another Ron Ormond film, it's called The 39 Stripes. That was kind of about prison ministry. Those are a couple that we're interested in finding, but we're interested in lots of them, and even titles that we aren't yet familiar with.
Okay, now, what part of the countries do you think that most of these films would be located?
It depends, but a lot of them are going to be in the Bible Belt. That's where, like Estes Perkle's films, Ron Ormond's films, that's where they were produced. They screened in a lot of churches all through the Bible Belt. But they screened in churches all through the country. They screened in Sunday school classes, Christian camps. Then they actually screened all over the world, and to this day they're still being shown in China, in the Philippines, and throughout Africa, throughout South America. In this country, primarily the Bible Belt, but they would be in churches everywhere.
Yeah, and like you said, those Christian camps, they got those all over the place.
Mm-hmm. A friend of mine, comedian Derek Sheen, when he was, I think about 10 or 11 years old, he was in a Baptist youth camp where they showed one of these films called A Footman Tire You What Will Horses Do. They actually showed another one, The Burning Hell. Both of those films, if you find comments about them online, and they have a very polarizing effect on people. People either their beliefs are strengthened, and they sort of resolve to follow God's commandments. There are other people who are so kind of disturbed by them that they are turned off from Christianity altogether. More so kind of with some of Ron Ormond's films than with Footman. That reaction, I've read some comments like that for The Burning Hell as well. That kind of comes down to people's beliefs about hell, I think.
And also, too, I guess the age when you watched it, and, what your frame of mind was at the time. If you're like in a rebellious stage, you might have kind of,
but that's true.
Yeah.
They were shown to a lot of children, and they were shown in a lot of Sunday school classes. So, and some of these films are very gory. So they kind of traumatized a lot of kids throughout the country. Now, I've talked to preachers who told me that initially they would send. But I talked to a preacher, Tim Green, who worked with Ron Ormond, and he also worked with Estes Perkel's family in shipping these films out. He told me that initially he sent them out, and people just went, "It's a Christian film, put it in a Sunday school class." They weren't thinking about the content of the film, so he began to send out warnings with the films. You don't want to show this to young kids, but initially they were shown to a lot of young kids.
And the films, this particular films that you're looking for, which denominations do you think that they would be denominations of churches that we should be looking at?
Well, again, we are looking for all kinds of Christian films of all denominations. We don't want to focus on any one denomination. So Baptist, Catholic, everywhere in between, any kind of Christian films we're interested in, and we want to preserve them. These films that I'm talking about, the films directed by Ron Ormond, they were. Estes Perkel was a Southern Baptist preacher. Ron Ormond got a lot of support from the Southern Baptist Convention, a lot of financing from them. So they were produced by Baptists, basically, but they were aimed at Christians, really of all denominations, maybe not so much Catholic, but they were really trying to reach people who weren't Christians. That was really the goal of all these films, that they were made with a conviction of bringing people to Christ. So, they were trying to reach all kinds of people. They weren't really just trying to show them to Christians. The thing is, they would rent prints out to churches all over the country and all over the world. And the requirement would be the churches had to put flyers up advertising a free screening, so anybody from the public could come in and to these screenings to see the films.
And what about like LDS? Because I know they're big into. They had that Davy and Goliath. Remember Davy and Goliath?
I don't think that was LDS. I think that was Lutheran Church.
Oh, was it?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay, but
I love Davy and Goliath.
Yeah, me too. Right? It's a classic. I wonder why they don't have it on anymore.
They used to. That's true. They used to have it on. If you stayed up really late in the morning, it would be on at like 5 in the morning.
Yeah. Hey, Davy, what would God say?
It's still on.
I don't know, Davy.
I'm flipping through channels. One of the Christian satellite channels shows it, but it's not on public TV anymore.
Now, have you tried contacting like these, the headquarters of, say, like the Assemblies of God, and say, hey, can you give us your mailing list and contact all these churches for us? We're looking for these kind of films, and we're willing to pay for them.
A few, yeah, we've done that with a few, and we reach people who just kind of don't, this is sort of an age that is so beyond film, beyond projectors,
right, that
people just don't know. They don't really even know who to ask a lot of the time. And I can't blame them. Who would you go to? At any organization. Do you have old films in some closet somewhere? I don't know. Who would you ask? So it's difficult. A lot of people just don't know. They don't know who to go to with that question.
See, but I'm thinking if you went to like the headquarters of the Assembly of God, right? Just off the top of my head, one denomination I'm thinking of, and you said, hey, can I have an email list of all your churches? I want to send them this and offer to purchase these films if they have them in their basements and their attics. Maybe they would work something out with you.
I probably should have talked to you about this a lot earlier on. I didn't even thought about that. That's a great idea.
Well, this is the kind of stuff I do for a living. People say, hey, I need to locate these films. Yeah. So I come up with these ideas. This is why they pay me the big bucks, man. Okay. Now,
you know what? Sometimes searching for films or kind of lost films or prints of any kind of film, it can take a lot of detective work.
Right.
A lot of detective work. I've been working on finding prints of films that were stored at this lab in Pittsburgh. It closed down 10 years ago, and it takes a lot of time and calling people, and it takes a lot of detective work. So
Well, give me an idea.
To a detective.
If you have a lab that closed down, what'd you do? You tried to find the former employees and then call them up?
Yeah, no, these aren't Christian films. This is just for a different film archive. Yeah, I found the former owner. I found the lending company that sold the building. I found. I was kind of sent on a wild goose chase. So they might be here, they might be there, they might be at a library. I called like every place in Pittsburgh basically over 3 weeks, and then I found out, no, this guy has them. And then I found out this guy. Anyway, yeah.
Because besides this, you in your personal life, you also too try and archive mainstream secular films.
Yeah, I have a day job in film asset preservation.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, very interesting. Okay. And so now, what are the big titles we're looking for in all this?
Some of the big titles in terms of Christian films, not necessarily just the ones that we're looking for, but The Burning Hell, which is one that we are working on right now that we're going to release in Blu-ray, is one of the very big ones. Thief in the Night series is another one. Left Behind. These are sort of the biggest titles in terms of classic Christian films. There are so many that people have never heard of, though. There are, like a million Christian shorts that they would show in Sunday school classes, especially made in the 50s and 60s. You can find volumes of like DVD compilations of those. There are a lot of them. Now, they weren't very well stored, so we are interested in films like those. We're interested in feature films. There were Christian-produced feature films that occasionally were theatrically distributed. We're interested in those. We're interested in everything in between. We're interested in films made by any denomination, really, too. So even LDS films, we are interested in preserving them.
Now, you're saying that a lot of these films were produced back in the 50s and 60s. Now, that was in the day. There weren't a lot of independent filmmakers back in those days. It was like the big studio system, like Louis B. Mayer, the big studio system, right?
Right.
So who was it then? The churches were hiring film crews and actors?
No, well, certain churches would have some money and they would hire their own filmmakers to produce things. In a way, it was sort of done to advertise those churches if they were really big churches. But that would be one aspect of it. Mostly, they were produced because a specific pastor, reverend, preacher, or filmmaker had a desire to make Christian films, felt compelled to do this for God, and that's one of the things that is very important to us, is that there was a very serious conviction that was behind the making of these films. And it's very important to us that when we present information about these films, when we release these films on Blu-ray, like we're releasing The Burning Hell on Blu-ray, that we release them and we present information in a way that is very respectful to the filmmakers and to the beliefs and the convictions that were behind the making of those films. You don't find that a lot. Sometimes these films are presented very mockingly, and that's something we don't like. So it's important to us that we present everything in a very respectful way to the people who made them, because there was a very serious conviction behind the making of them in the first place, most of the time.
And I guess, though, because now with current film techniques, I guess the special effects and things and the acting, because you mentioned before off the air that a lot of the actors were members of the church. They just had, amateur actors.
I mean, the three Estes Pergel films that we're doing 4K restorations on right now, one of the biggest things that people make fun of about those movies is the acting. It's really easy to make fun of the acting in those movies. I started watching them when I was about 17, and at the time, I kind of made fun of the acting a lot. The more you find out about them, though, I think it's very interesting, but you're less inclined to make fun of them. The actors in a lot of those movies were just congregation members in Estes Pergel's church. They weren't professional actors. A lot of them had never acted before, and they had to do some weird things. In If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do?, which was Estes Pergel's first movie, it's about what would happen if communists took over the United States, how they would be persecuting Christians, which happened in a lot of communist nations. there are a lot of really gory scenes in those movies, in that movie in particular. And so, you had people who had never acted before performing sometimes weird death scenes or just weird torture scenes that would have seemed strange to anybody, especially people who had never acted before. They did it because they really believed in the message that Estes Perkle was preaching, that he was trying to get across to people. So they really believed in the importance of the film that Perkle was making. That they had never acted before, it's really kind of amazing that they were as brave as they were to do something so foreign to them and sometimes very bizarre stuff. It makes the acting a lot less funny to me.
And what about special effects? Did they have like crude special effects?
Well, yeah. The director, Ron Ormond, his wife also produced his film. They were co-producers. She was involved in the distribution of all of his earlier most of his earlier exploitation movies. But she was involved in like the makeup, a lot of the special effects. So a lot of gore makeup she would do. I'm not sure. I think they hired a guy to do squibs on one of the movies. Like
oh, really?
Heads. Yeah. But she did a scene, people being stabbed and stuff. June Ormond did the special effects for those movies.
Now, back then, I guess, what was this, like Russian communists or Chinese communists? So did they have Chinese?
All of them, yeah. I mean, in the film, Estes Perkle addresses all the Chinese communists, Russian communists, Cuba, yeah.
So
sorry, go ahead.
They had actual ethnic actors, or they just kind of faked it?
No, they had a bunch of.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Yeah, they have people. They have Russians with interesting accents.
Real Russians or fake accents?
No. They were guys. Some people are texting me. Can you hear that?
What was that?
Is it dinging on your end?
No, not at all. No, your audio is
okay,
great.
good.
Yeah.
Sorry. They had a guy who was a promoter for Sun Records who plays the lead commissar in If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? His name is Cecil Scaife, and he was a promoter for Sun Records, so he worked with Sam Phillips.
Okay.
And he was a friend of Ron Ormond's. He'd been in an earlier movie directed by Ron Ormond called The Exotic Ones, which was the Ormonds' last exploitation movie before they began just making Christian movies. And it was their most exploitation-y exploitation movie. So they went like, we're going to make one last exploitation movie. This is going to be the biggest one. And then that was it. Then they were out. And they just made Christian movies after that.
Okay, so after you get these films and you have them preserved and restored, you're going to make them available to people, like on Amazon, I guess?
Yeah, we're still working that out because we're working out
the rights.
The rights are worked out. I've been working with the Perkle family for a couple of years.
Okay.
And they're amazing people. They're the nicest people on earth. The rights are worked out. It's more the rights with companies that we are thinking about having release the Blu-rays.
Oh, I got you.
We're figuring out what digital platforms we're going to go with.
Okay.
So that hasn't all been decided yet. But yeah, they're going to be released digitally. They're going to be released on Blu-ray. I would guess Amazon, probably iTunes.
iTunes, yeah.
Yeah. Now we're also working on Estes Perkle. Besides producing these 3 movies, he released a bunch of LPs. He recorded various sermons that he released on LP. And we are working on a box set. It's going to be a release of all of his LPs in one box.
Okay, now that's interesting, too. Besides this film, you're looking for sermons, too, as well, or just audio sermons?
Yeah, we're looking for sermons, audio sermons on LP. We're not so much interested in LPs as we are interested in the recording masters, the original master recordings that were used for sermons on LP.
Okay, excellent. Okay, we're getting toward the end of the time here, so now people should go to archivalrevival.blogspot.com. I guess that would be step 1. And then your email, if they want to reach you, is archival.revival@gmail.com. And so what they should do is talk to their pastors or their churches, their friends, and say, hey, you got any of these old films? And then they get a hold of you, and you guys cut a deal, and they get them over to you.
That's how it works.
Is there anything you want to leave us with before we go? Maybe a song? You want to sing us a song?
No.
I was just interviewing Donnie Most. So.
You know what? It's funny. There's a song at the beginning of the movie, The Burning Hell, called the Hell Song. And it's kind of, I think it's Estes Perkel's choir from his church. They actually went over to the Holy Land. They did a lot of filming of that movie in the Holy Land. So the opening of that film is the choir from his church singing this original song. And when we found, when I was going through all the cans for the films, I found the original mag recording for that song. So another person in Archival Revival who does audio restoration made a stereo mix of that song that we're going to release on 7-inch.
Okay, very cool. Now, I just was thinking, too, as you were talking, I just realized this show was heard in so many different countries, in Ireland, in England, in Africa, all over the world. Yeah,
and there are prints of these films all over the world. A lot of them were sold. I mean, I know for a fact a lot of them, hundreds of them, were sold to somebody in Africa. It's a big continent. Somewhere there are hundreds of those films. They are all over the world.
We have a huge audience in Africa because the name Opperman is a South African. It's a big name down in South Africa. There's a lot of Oppermans down there. So for some reason,
I know there are a lot of prints of the Grim Reaper. So if anybody in South Africa knows where there are prints of the Grim Reaper, please contact us.
And what if they're foreign films? Then they're not American films, but they're foreign films. Would you be interested in that?
Yeah, we are still interested in those. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay, archivalrevival.blogspot.com. The email is archival.revival at gmail.com. If you have trouble getting a hold of Brian Rosenquist, just get a hold of me and I'll get your message over to him. operamanreport at gmail.com. Maybe we're going to put a banner too. There's going to be a banner on the Awake radio station and also operamanreport.com. So you can check this out. And okay, Brian, thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, great. archivalrevival.blogspot.com. And now a word from our sponsors. Archival Revival, the Christian Film Archive, is currently paying for vintage Christian films. They are dedicated to preserving and restoring classic Christian films and media. So if you have an original prints, negatives, or other film elements of classic Christian films, or you have audio recording masters for classic Christian record albums, they want to buy them from you. So email archival.revival@gmail.com and they're going to make you an offer. Archival Revival wants to preserve these classic Christian films so that they continue saving people for years. These films have brought people to salvation. They want to continue that. Their staff has decades of experience in handling and preserving of film elements, and they utilize the very best climate-controlled film storage facilities around the world. Contact them today at archival.revival@gmail.com. If there's someone you know has these prints, negatives, recording masters, or other materials from vintage Christian films, you can check out their blog at archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Now, just so you understand, Archival Revival wants to pay you for these films. So you can look in your church attic, in the church basement. If you have a friend who runs a Christian youth ministry or these youth vacation Bible study camps, they have these old films in those big metal containers, 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. Archival Revival wants to buy them from you. So this is a sponsor that actually wants to give you money. And all you have to do is contact them, tell them what you have. If you're in the UK or Ireland or Africa, these films are all over the world, and they're gathering dust, and they're going to deteriorate if they don't get into the hands of Archival Revival. So that's archival.revival@gmail.com, or the blog spot is archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Don't forget, this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. Phoebe Sod is an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. The Cocoa Exchange is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries, and they make the finest silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you go to pscocoa.com, you click on the Shop Now button, you can see all their beautiful chocolates, you can order it right now tonight, it could be in your mailbox in a couple of days, or if you want to get into the chocolate business, you want to be a chocolatier just like Phoebe Sod, you can click the Contact Us button, and you can learn how to get your own website, go into the cocoa chocolate business, and sell chocolate and make a little bit of money there. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But you also do all the kind of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites. And we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, even gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication or involved in a extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Adoption investigations. If you want to locate your birth parents or your birth child you gave away for adoption, we can do adoption investigations for you. Asset searches for you. Locate bank accounts, hidden assets, hidden properties, hidden income, all different kinds of services in the asset search investigation. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we can do an email trace investigation for you, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. You can have your ad played here at oppermanreport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report members section. In the members section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you even get a copy of my book. I want to thank Shaun Duff from strawman.com. He runs the website. He runs the member section. And I also want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us to produce the show and book guests. You can find Shaun Duff at strawmanmusic.com. He's an excellent musician. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube.